So imagine you're building this like groundbreaking piece of software, right? You're pouring millions of dollars into development, and right before you can release it to your customers, the National Security Agency steps in and demands the keys to your code for 30 days.
Just to, see if it could be weaponized.
Right, exactly. And as of yesterday, August 1st, 2026, that is no longer just some hypothetical scenario. I
Yeah.
mean, the era of building an AI model and simply shipping it out to the public to see what happens, that is officially over.
Oh, absolutely. It's a completely different landscape now.
It really is. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are unpacking a massive stack of sources from July. We've got news roundups, legal analyses, technical documentation, and our mission today is to map out this monumental shift that is happening right now in the industry.
Yeah, we are rapidly moving away from that unregulated Wild West of AI development. We're heading straight into an era of intense government scrutiny, just massive budget corrections, and well, a whole new web of stealth legal liabilities.
It's a lot to cover. But before we get into the actual mechanisms of how this is all playing out, I do need to make a really quick note to you listening. The sources we're analyzing today discuss some highly politically charged events.
Right, involving President Trump, the Biden administration, and bipartisan lawmakers.
Exactly. And as always, we are not taking any political sides today. Our goal is strictly to report on the factual timeline and the ideas contained in these sources, not to endorse the viewpoints or policies of any administration or politician.
Yeah, our focus is entirely on the tangible ripple effects. How these policies are actually hitting the market and the technology itself.
Right, just the facts. Which brings us to the immovable deadline that just passed. Yesterday, August 1st, was the anchor for the U.S. government's new AI framework.
And this all traces back to Executive Order 14409, which was signed back on June 2nd.
Yeah, and the core mechanism of this order, it mandates this voluntary framework where developers of what the government is calling covered frontier models have to give federal agencies up to 30 days of pre-release access.
Right. And the intention behind that 30-day window is, it's highly specific. Agencies like the NSA and CISA, they're testing these models for offensive cyber capabilities before the public ever gets their hands on them.
Which makes sense, I guess. They want to know what they're dealing with.
Exactly. They are trying to determine if a new model can be used to autonomously exploit vulnerabilities in, national security systems or critical infrastructure.
Like rural hospitals, community banks, the local power grid, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly that. The government just wants to poke and prod the model to see if it can, say, write zero-day malware or automate phishing campaigns at some catastrophic scale.
But the lead up to this August 1st deadline, it was surrounded by immense political drama. Our sources note that President Trump actually abruptly canceled the Oval Office signing ceremony for this very executive order.
He did, yeah. He cited concerns to reporters that slowing down the release of American models could, quote, undermine America's lead over China.
Right. And even before the cancellation, you had tech advocates like David Sachs fighting this intense behind-the-scenes battle to slash the review window down. It was originally supposed to be 90 days, and they got it down to 30.
Which is a huge reduction. But despite the canceled ceremony and all that fierce lobbying, the August 1st deadline to finalize the testing protocols, it remained totally set in stone.
Because the actual statutory deliverables under the executive order, they weren't contingent on a photo op or a ceremony.
Exactly. By yesterday, the intelligence agencies had to deliver their classified benchmarking process. And that's really the critical phrase here, classified benchmarks.
Okay, wait, I want to pause on that for a second because it sounds insane. Is this essentially like building a revolutionary new sports car, but the government demands the keys for a month before you can sell it, just to make sure it can't be weaponized?
It's a great analogy, but it's even more complicated than that, because you have to figure out what defines a covered frontier model in the first place.
Right, like how do you even know your sports car qualifies for the test?
Exactly. Developers are building these incredibly complex systems, but the criteria that define whether their system gets flagged by the government are classified.
So they don't even know the rules of the game they're playing.
No, they don't. The NSA director has the final say, but the developers themselves don't actually know the metrics they're being judged against. It's like walking into a final exam where the professor refuses to give you the rubric, but tells you that if you fail, you're expelled.
Oh, wow. That's terrifying for a business.
It really is. Developers face this massive wall of uncertainty. They might spend $100 million training a model, only to realize at the 11th hour that it triggers this classified designation.
And because it's opaque, they might not know until they're already in the government's crosshairs. I can see how that creates a severe chilling effect on, like, release timelines and product roadmaps.
Oh, absolutely. And we can already see how this opaque policy is physically altering the AI tools that you, the listener, interact with every single day.
Yeah, it's forcibly splitting the market into these safe public tiers and unsafe restricted tiers. I mean, just look at the absolute saga with Anthropic's Fable 5.
Right. Fable 5 was hit with that 19-day government-ordered suspension over export control concerns.
Which is just unprecedented for a commercial software release, isn't it?
Completely unprecedented.
And when it finally returned globally in early July, the conditions were incredibly strict. Like, if you want to use Fable 5 today, Anthropic's updated privacy policy requires mandatory government-issued ID verification.
And beyond just the ID check, the model itself has been heavily modified.
Right, it contains these built-in safety classifiers that basically act as a governor on the engine. They'll actively intercept and refuse requests that they deem too risky.
But simultaneously, Anthropic released Mythos 5, and Mythos 5 shares the exact same underlying neural networking capabilities as Fable 5, but it has absolutely zero safety classifiers installed.
So it's the unfiltered version.
Exactly. It has no internal governor. It will answer any prompt, generate any code, and analyze any system without hesitation.
But you and I cannot simply log into an API and access Mythos 5. It is locked behind an initiative called Project Glasswing, which is exclusively available to highly vetted government and enterprise partners.
Right. And OpenAI experienced the exact same friction with GPT 5.6.
Yeah, the Sol, Terra, and Luna versions of 5.6 were completely gated. They were restricted to this tiny pool of about 20 vetted organizations for weeks.
I mean, Sam Altman had to physically travel to Washington, D.C. to preview the model for lawmakers.
Yeah. And the Commerce Department's Center for AI Standards and Innovation didn't even clear it for broad public release until July 8th.
Because the mechanism at play here is that the U.S. government is now treating high-capability AI models more like sensitive military exports.
Like advanced munitions or cryptography.
Exactly, rather than just treating them like standard enterprise software updates.
Okay, I am struggling to square the government's language with reality here, though, because our sources explicitly point out that the executive order does not authorize mandatory licensing or strict preclearance.
Right. They are very careful with their wording.
But if a company like Anthropic gets slapped with a 19-day ban until they comply, and OpenAI has to wait for a clearance stamp from the Commerce Department, haven't we just stumbled into a de facto involuntary licensing regime?
You're not the only one pointing that out. Former White House AI advisor Dean Ball actually raised that exact cognitive dissonance. He warned that a de facto involuntary licensing regime risks handing geopolitical adversaries a really significant advantage.
Because we're just slowing ourselves down with red tape.
Exactly. But to understand why the government is playing this game of semantics, you have to look at the dual-use nature of frontier models.
Meaning they can be used for both good and bad things.
Right. The exact same capabilities that make a model incredibly dangerous offensively make it utterly invaluable defensively.
Okay, so the same reasoning capabilities required to spot a vulnerability and write an exploit can be used to spot that same vulnerability and write a patch.
Precisely. And the sources detail this great example.
Yeah.
The Alberta government in Canada is actively using Claude to find and fix cybersecurity vulnerabilities across their entire provincial infrastructure.
Wow, so they just set the AI loose on their own systems.
Yeah, the AI scans millions of lines of legacy code, prioritizes the severity of the flaws, generates candidate patches, and creates audit-ready documentation for the human engineers.
That's incredible.
It is. The Alberta government reported a drastically reduced mean time to remediation. So the defensive benefits are just staggering.
And the U.S. government obviously recognizes this.
Oh, of course. They want to monopolize those unrestricted defensive benefits for themselves and their trusted partners.
Yeah.
That's exactly why Mythos 5 is walled off in Project Glasswing, while they fiercely gate the offensive risks from the general public.
That makes a lot of sense. But while the government is bottlenecking the top tier of models to secure those defensive advantages, the financial reality of the market is kicking in.
Yeah, the budgets are really taking a hit.
Because while U.S. frontier labs are stuck in regulatory limbo, dealing with classified rubrics and 19-day suspensions, enterprise buyers still have a business to run. I mean, they still have to manage their IT budgets. And if you look at the Q2 budgets for enterprise AI, calling it brutal feels like an understatement.
It's a complete cash burn crisis.
Yeah.
The sources are actually calling this the token maxing sequel.
Right. Because in early 2026, companies basically fundamentally mismanaged their AI adoption. Developers were engaging in what the industry termed vibe coding.
Vibe coding, yeah. Just throwing the most expensive, highly capable frontier models at every tiny mundane task.
Exactly. Uber burned through its entire annual AI budget in just 4 months. And users of GitHub Copilot saw their operating prices increase by 10 to 50 times as the underlying models grew more complex.
And those days of subsidized, cheap frontier intelligence, they are totally over. As of July 8th, Fable 5 cost $10 per million input tokens and a staggering $50 per million output tokens.
That sounds expensive, but can you put that into perspective for the listener? Like, what does that actually look like in practice?
Sure, so if you are running an autonomous coding agent, a system that iteratively writes code, tests it, reads the error logs, and rewrites it, a single session can easily process 2 million output tokens. That means one relatively standard automated task could cost your company $100.
Wow. Just for one task.
Right. Now scale that across a team of 50 developers working every single day, and the financial model collapses entirely.
So enterprise IT directors are freaking out, and the market is reacting with this massive structural pivot. I mean, CNBC confirmed a statistic that completely upends the traditional Silicon Valley narrative.
Yeah, this one is wild.
Between 30 and 46% of U.S. enterprise API token usage is now flowing to Chinese AI models.
That is just a staggering reallocation of market share in a matter of months.
It's entirely unprecedented. The sources detail how a Chinese open-weight model called GLM 5.2 achieved 80 times customer growth on the Vercel platform in a single week.
80 times in a week.
Yeah, the daily token volume grew 27 times over. And the crazy thing is, this pivot has nothing to do with politics. It is pure, ruthless math.
Always comes down to the budget.
Exactly. GLM 5.2 costs 60 to 90% less than Western frontier models, but it scores 62.1% on the SWE Bench Pro coding benchmark, which actually beats OpenAI's GPT 5.5.
And for context, SW Bench Pro isn't just asking a model to write a simple function. It asks the model to resolve real-world software engineering issues, pulled from actual GitHub repositories.
So it's hard.
Very hard. Scoring above 60% on that benchmark means the model is highly capable of handling the vast majority of routine, day-to-day software development tasks.
Meaning U.S. frontier labs are effectively pricing themselves out of the middle tier of enterprise workflows.
Exactly. So the industry is adopting what they call the advisor model routing technique.
Okay, I like to think of this like structuring a corporate law firm. You do not have the senior partner who bills at $1,000 an hour, drafting standard introductory emails or organizing case files, right?
Right, that would be a huge waste of money.
Exactly. You have your interns, which in this case are the cheap, highly capable Chinese open-weight models like GLM 5.2 and DeepSeek do the bulk of the routine work. Data extraction, basic summarization, standard code completion.
And then your routing software only escalates the prompt to the expensive senior partner like GPT 5.6 Sol for the absolute hardest, most complex reasoning problems.
That makes perfect business sense.
It does. And the entire AI infrastructure ecosystem is rapidly evolving to institutionalize this intern strategy. It is not just some temporary workaround to save a few dollars.
No, it's becoming the standard. Like the sources mention a startup called Bespoke Labs that just raised $40 million specifically for AI post-training infrastructure.
Right. And this is where we get into reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF.
We often hear that term thrown around as just making the model better, but in this context, it's about fundamentally altering the model's behavior, isn't it?
Exactly the right distinction. RLHF isn't just teaching a model new facts. It is steering the tone, the safety guardrails, and the formatting to match a company's specific risk profile.
So Bespoke Labs lets a company basically domesticate these foreign models?
Yes. They provide the infrastructure for an enterprise to take a raw, cheap, Chinese open-weight model and fine-tune its behavior. They can steer it so that it adheres perfectly to their internal compliance guidelines or industry jargon,
which allows enterprises to feel incredibly safe relying on these foreign models as their base layer, which just further threatens the market share of Western frontier labs.
And the disruption is moving even higher up the value chain, too. Look at Thrive Holdings.
Right, which was started by OpenAI investor Thrive Capital. They just raised $2 billion.
And their entire strategy is to buy controlling stakes in traditional professional services, firms like accounting agencies, legal research firms, and just straight up automate their middle management layers with these fine-tuned AI systems.
all to capture that massive margin expansion. The financial incentive to automate is just overwhelming right now.
It really is. But this aggressive pursuit of cost savings brings us to probably the most dangerous development of 2026.
Yeah. Because if you successfully bypass the US government bottleneck by routing your workflow to a cheap Chinese open weight model, you might survive financially in the short term. But by adopting a less vetted model, you've just walked right into a massive liability blind spot.
The legal consequences are finally catching up to the technology, and honestly, the current landscape is just a tangled patchwork of overlapping rules.
Right. In Congress, the House proposed the GAIA, the Great American AI Act. It's this massive bipartisan bill that aims to preempt state laws for 3 years.
Specifically to avoid a scenario where developers have to comply with 50 different state frameworks.
But right now, it's just a discussion draft. The states aren't actually waiting. Like, Illinois just passed SB 315, making it the first state to demand independent third-party audits for frontier models.
But the explicit AI laws aren't actually the most insidious threat to businesses right now. The Future for Privacy Forum source dives deep into this concept of stealth liability.
Right, because earlier we mentioned that the government is pushing voluntary standards like the NIST AI Risk Management Framework or international standards like ISO 42001.
And federal agencies consistently message that these are just, voluntary best practices for safe AI development.
But in reality, plaintiffs' lawyers are weaponizing those exact voluntary standards in state courts.
Let's walk through how that actually happens in practice, because the mechanism here is vital for any enterprise user to understand.
Okay, let's break it down.
So, in traditional negligence or strict product liability cases, a jury has to decide if a company met the standard of care. Now, if a state doesn't have a specific AI regulation on the books, a plaintiff's lawyer will literally bring the NIST framework into the courtroom. They'll argue, Your Honor, the federal government published this comprehensive framework outlining exactly how to deploy AI safely. The defendant chose to use a cheap foreign model, failed to implement the NIST safety protocols, and therefore their product is legally defective.
Wow, so even if compliance with NIST is technically voluntary, failing to follow the framework is framed as acting in bad faith.
Exactly, which opens the door for massive punitive damages. These non-binding standards are basically becoming de facto legal requirement through the back door of the judicial system.
That is wild. So you really cannot simply ignore NIST just because the cover page says voluntary?
No, absolutely not.
And the Holland and Hart legal analysis points out that the risk isn't just civil, it is criminal.
Yeah, this is where it gets really scary for companies.
Right. If you deploy an autonomous AI agent to interface with a vendor system, and that agent hallucinates, say it ignores its guardrails and aggressively scrapes confidential data, or it corrupts a database, the Attorney General is prioritizing enforcement against the deploying company under the CFAA.
Which are the federal criminal hacking laws.
Yes. The government views the AI's hallucination as unauthorized access conducted on your behalf.
This completely reframes the risk calculation. I really want to emphasize this for everyone listening. Compliance in AI is no longer just about avoiding a regulatory fine. It is about avoiding being sued into oblivion by your own customers for strict product liability, or facing actual federal hacking charges because your automated intern made a mistake.
Which really begs the question, if I am an enterprise user and I literally have to use these cheaper models to survive the budget crisis, how do I actually protect myself from this legal landmine?
Demonstrating rigorous documented governance is now mandatory for survival. You can no longer just plug an API key into your software and hope for the best.
You need receipts.
Exactly. You need documented testing, you need strict access governance for your AI agents, and most importantly, you need robust programmatic error handling.
Which brings us right back to how Anthropic designed the return of Fable 5.
Yes, it's a perfect example of defensive engineering. When Fable 5's internal safety classifier intercepts a prompt and refuses a request, it will not just crash the system.
Right. Anthropic designed the API to return a successful HTTP 200 response code, but it's bundled with a clear, machine-readable refusal reason.
So to translate that from developer jargon, the API isn't throwing a catastrophic error that breaks your whole app. It is calmly reporting back, I received your request successfully, but I am refusing to answer it for this specific safety reason.
Right, and because it returns a successful code, developers can easily program their applications to recognize that refusal, use fallback credits, and automatically route the prompt to a different model.
Yeah, and that kind of systematic, documented governance Proving to a judge that you anticipated the risks, built safety fallbacks, and handled errors gracefully, that is exactly what the courts will look for when deciding if you met the standard of care.
It's all about proving you did the work. So when we step back and look at the totality of these sources from July 2026, the through line is just undeniably clear.
It really is.
Government friction, classified security benchmarks, and exorbitant token prices at the top of the market are severely squeezing developers. And that financial pressure is forcing businesses to route their workflows to cheaper, often foreign open-weight models just to survive.
But by doing so, they are stepping out of the walled garden. They're exposing themselves to a creeping invisible web of state-level lawsuits and stealth liability based on weaponized voluntary frameworks.
It is a profound paradox. The intense effort to control and secure the absolute frontier of AI is inadvertently pushing the actual day-to-day enterprise usage of AI into cheaper, less scrutinized avenues.
And that shift is transferring a massive amount of legal exposure right onto the businesses who are simply trying to remain competitive.
It really is the ultimate unintended consequence of regulation, which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to mull over as we wrap up today.
Let's hear it.
If covered frontier models continue to become heavily regulated, immensely expensive, and legally risky utilities here in the United States, will the next major world-changing AI application even come from an established tech giant? Or will the sheer cost of compliance push the real breakthroughs out beyond the edge of the map?
That's a great question.
Like, could the next massive leap emerge from an underground, decentralized collective that operates entirely outside of these borders, these classifications, and these liability frameworks?
You know, history shows that when the administrative burden of innovation becomes too costly, the innovators don't just stop building. They simply move to where the costs and the laws cannot reach them.
It's going to be fascinating to watch unfold. Thank you for joining us on today's deep dive into the shifting architecture of AI. Keep questioning the frameworks around you, keep exploring the mechanisms behind the headlines, and we will see you next time as we continue to map out this rapidly evolving landscape.